If you would, take your Bibles and turn to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. We're going to begin there. 1 Samuel. Maybe a little bit of an introduction to what we're talking about today. Chad led that song for us. I'm so grateful to him for that. Can't remember what number it was at the moment, but maybe he could remind me real quick. What number was 545? Oh, the fount of every blessing. Good song. Sometimes we look at that and we have to go remind ourselves, what does that mean? Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come. Kind of something referenced from the Old Testament. We're going to look at that today. And what does it mean to here I raise my Ebenezer? Do we have Ebenezers we need to be raising? And I think that we do. So starting maybe at the beginning of what we want to talk about, to give a little background to the Ebenezer stone that is raised up in Samuel's day. We understand back in chapter 1 of 1 Samuel that there's a woman named Hannah who's barren, and her husband has two wives. The other one's not barren, and the one who's not barren kind of pokes fun at Hannah. She prays and goes and visits the tabernacle, and Eli's there, and he sees her praying. He thinks she's drunk, but finally he knows what she's talking about. God's going to bless her with a child, and that child is Samuel. And on the flip side of that, she's going to give this child to the Lord for the service of God the rest of his life. Verse 21 in 1 Samuel chapter 1 says, the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with the 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord. There's a very touching story, really. The ladies just seem to love it. It touched them very much. So having little children and maybe identifying with Hannah. But this is really what we need to be doing with our children. We can't get too far from that. When we have a child, we need to, in a sense, prepare them to be lent to the Lord and train them in that way. And it's not a small undertaking. I want us to read Hannah's prayer when she takes him up and he is given to the Lord. It's in chapter 2, in the first 10 verses there. It says, and Hannah prayed and said, my heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven, and the Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. So in here she speaks about the power of God as a God who helps those who are powerless, and he brings to nothing those who appear to be powerful. That's really what this prayer is about, as she gives Samuel away. We've got to remember what period of history this is. Samuel is going to be the last judge. At this time, he is a baby, or at least a very, very young child. So there's still a little bit left to go in the period of the judges, where Israel is not living right. They constantly are leaving God. So think about those things, being constantly ones who are going away from God. And that's the climate of this. She's giving her son away. And she says this because there's such wickedness around, that God is going to bring Israel low. But those who will submit to him, he will exalt. And that's really the story of this leading up to the Ebenezer stone. It is said of Samuel in chapter 2 and verse 26, "Now the boy Samuel continued to grow in both stature and in favor with the Lord and also with man." Very similar to the statement in Luke chapter 2 and verse 52 about Jesus, that he continued to go along. Basically, almost the same sentence used about our Lord, that Samuel grew just like he's supposed to. As one who's going to be a servant of God. So we cannot forget that. We cannot forget who all the things leading up to this, the wickedness of Israel. Let's look at a little bit of picture of the wickedness of Israel. Eli is the current judge. He is also a priest. He appears to be the high priest, and his sons are working as high priests as well, or as priests as well. They're wicked men. Chapter 3 talks about that of 1 Samuel. We'll start reading in verse 12. And this is after Samuel gets this call of God, which we'll go back and look at in just a second. But chapter 3, starting in verse 12 and going through verse 17, it's written there, "On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever." Samuel lay until morning. Then he opened the door of the house of the Lord, and Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. But Eli called Samuel and said, "Samuel, my son." He said, "Here I am." And Eli said, "What is it that he told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you, and more also, if you hide anything from me of all that he said to you." So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." And we look back at chapter 2, for instance, and we read of what is going on. Why is Eli being treated this way? Why is God, basically what some would say, attacking him? Well, chapter 2 and verse 12 says, "Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord." Now it's going to talk about some of the things they were doing with the offerings that people would bring. It says, "The custom of the priests with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come, and while the meat was boiling, with a three-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, 'Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw.' And if the man said to him, 'Let them burn the fat first, and then take as much as you wish,' he would say, 'No, you must give it now. And if not, I will take it by force.' Thus the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the men treated the offering of the Lord with contempt." They were doing wrong as far as what their jobs to offer meat for people was. Taking the best parts, not boiled, all of that kind of stuff. But there were some other things. Chapter 2 and verse 22. Verse 22 says, "Now Eli was very old, and he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he said to them, 'Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will meditate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him?' But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death." So Eli's son's incredibly wicked, and Eli even stands guilty before God. Remember, it says that Eli restrained them not. That's part of the prophecy, that Samuel received from God, which we read about in chapter 3. Samuel being called there by the Lord in chapter 3. And we're very familiar with this section of the scriptures. I believe that God gives Samuel basically a prophecy against Eli's house here in verse 1 through 14. It says, "Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. At the time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, 'Here I am,' and ran to Eli and said, 'Here I am, for you called me.' But he said, 'I did not call. Lie down again.' So he went and lay down. And the Lord called again Samuel, and Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, 'Here I am, for you called me.' But he said, 'I did not call, my son. Lie down again.' Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, 'Here I am, for you called me.' Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, 'Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.' So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood, calling as at other times, 'Samuel, Samuel.' And Samuel said, 'Speak, for your servant hears.' Then the Lord said to Samuel, 'Behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel, at which the 2 ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever.'" Prophecy against Eli's house is extremely harsh. And we see in the next chapter this prophecy coming to fruition. In chapter 4 and verse 1, it says, "And the word of the Lord, word came to Samuel, or the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the battlefield. And when the people came to camp, the elders of Israel said, 'Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies.'" They're going to treat this ark like some kind of a talisman or something like that. Remember, the people aren't serving God. Even the priests, they're laying with women in the door of the temple, or the tabernacle at the time. They're carrying on their jobs in just a heinous manner. They're guilty before the Lord. And if they're doing these things, what's the condition of the people? Well, it's probably very similar. This is the time of the judges. And so they go into battle with Philistia, a small country on the coast, and the Philistines rout them. 4,000 people die. Well, let's bring the ark in. That's all it'll take. The ark comes into camp, and just people yell with a shout. And it's such a scene that the Philistines are afraid even. Oh, the ark's coming to the camp. What are we going to do? Verse 5 says, "As soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, 'What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?' And when they learned that the ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid. For they said, 'A god has come into the camp.' And they said, 'Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us, who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. Take courage and be men, O Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight.' So the Philistines fought. What happens? Israel was defeated, and they fled, every man to his home. And there was a very great slaughter, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. Well, among them, Eli's sons were killed. The ark of God was captured, it says. The ark of God was captured, and the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. What a day for Israel. Even Eli, chapter 4 and verse 18, a young man comes and tells him the news of what has happened. And it says, as soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel for 40 years. Talk about a judgment, a prophecy coming to fruition in one day. 30,000, really at this time 34,000 have died. The sons of the high priest have died. The high priest has died. And now Phinehas, one of the ones that had died, gives birth to a child. And she names him Ichabod. Why? Well, it means glory departed, because the glory had departed from Israel. The glory of the Ark of the Covenant, where the presence of God was, it's not in possession of God's people anymore. It's gone. Philistines have stolen it. Well, thinking about those things, we can see God's hand against Eli's house, and really against all Israel, right? God is against them. But it's not going to stay that way. The ark, of course, with the Philistines for 7 months. You see that in chapter 6 and verse 1. They play fast and loose with this Ark of the Covenant, which represents to the Israelites the presence of God, and really to them as well. They thought they had defeated God almost when you talk about them defeating Israel. And what happens? Their god Dagon found bowed down to this Ark of the Covenant. It basically decimates one city, and they pass it off to another Philistine city till it goes to all 5 of them. And they said, we got to get rid of this thing. Let's send it back. It takes 7 months for them to pass it between 5 cities and say, let's get this out of here. And we're talking about something of extreme value, just in their standards with the metal. I mean, the lid of the ark was about 75 pounds of solid gold. Think they wouldn't have liked that? No, they're going to send it back with gifts, golden gifts. We don't really know what the gifts were. Tumors, rats, something like that. But they're some kind of gold thing that they send back. And they send this back because they had problems in every city. They returned this. They put it on a new cart. And they put that cart behind 2 milk cows who are actively milking, and they've got calves that are calling after them. Well, you that know cows, birthing calves, and milking them, I guess, tell it to me that they will go to that calf. And these cows hauled this cart straight away, straight towards Israel, lowing as they went, like they wanted to go to their calves, but it kept taking them straight. This was directed by God. This is going back to where it's supposed to go. Chapter 6, verse 10 through verse 12. Says there, then the men did so and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went straight in the direction of Beth Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. So they get that far. And the ark, once it gets to Beth Shemesh, it's removed from the cart. The cart is broken up, and the cows are offered on a stone that is there in the field of Joshua. This great stone, which is a witness stone. 1 Samuel 6 and verse 18, the second half of that verse. The great stone, beside which they set down the ark of the Lord, is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. Witness about what has happened. God's glory departed because you all were wicked. Now, interestingly, 20 years pass by from that point. The ark stays there at Kiriath Jearim, and the Philistines have returned it. It's back in Israel. Verse 7, chapter 7, and verse 1, then the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord and brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill. And they consecrated his son Eleazar to have charge of the ark of the Lord. From the day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years. And all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. But all this time, now, Samuel has become the spokesman for God. Verse 3 says, and Samuel said to all the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtaroth from among you, and direct your heart to the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So, time has come. He says, sanctify yourselves. If you're going to return to the Lord, you're going to have to get rid of all of these things that you've become involved in. The Philistines then attack again. Now remember, 20 years or so years have passed, and they attack them again. Verse 5 says, then Samuel said, gather all Israel at Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered at Mizpah, drew water, poured it out before the Lord, and fasted on that day, and said there, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah. Now when the Philistines heard that the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel, and when the people of Israel heard it, they were afraid of the Philistines. And the people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us, from the hand of the Philistines. So Samuel took a nursing lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. And Samuel was offering up the burnt offering. The Philistines drew near to attack Israel. But the Lord thundered with a mighty sound that day against the Philistines, and threw them into confusion, and they were defeated before Israel. And the men of Israel went out from Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them as far as below Beth-kar. So they were fearful of this crowd coming against them. And last time they had lost 34,000, lost the ark, lost the priesthood, you might say. God fights for them. There's going to be no doubt who wins this battle, and it is God. And yet Israel gets the victory through God. Verse 11 tells us that they strike them as far as below Beth-kar. Now we get to this. Samuel raises up a memorial stone, calls it Ebenezer. We reference it in the song we sing, 545. Verse 12 says, then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin, and called its name Ebenezer. For he said, till now the Lord has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter the territory of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. The cities that the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel, from Ekron to Gath, and Israel delivered their territory from the hand of the Philistines. There was peace also between Israel and the Amorites. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. So he raises up this memorial stone, call it Ebenezer, and it signified the thought that until now, the Lord has helped us, even in our evil, even in the things that we shouldn't have been involved in. He's protected us. After all, look, we're still here. After 400 years, or almost 400 years so far under the judges, and them doing evil, wicked things, the Lord is still with us. If we call on him, we return to him, he will deliver. That's what the Ebenezer stone is about. Until now, the Lord has helped us. So, we think about those things. There are several such stones of remembrance in Israel's history. We have the stones in Genesis chapter 31. You may remember those. After Jacob works for Laban, he works 7 years for Rachel, gets Leah, works another week, and gets Rachel, but has to work 7 more. He works 14 years. And then 6 more years. So we're up to 14, now 20. He works 6 more years, basically getting all of Laban's animals for himself. And then he leaves in the dark of night, under the cover of darkness, takes everything with him. Laban overtakes him. And we look there in verse 44, Genesis 31, in verse 44. It says this about these memorial stones. Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone, set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar-Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. Now we look down at verse 51. And Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. God's between us. We see them set up by the Jordan River. This is going to be in the book of Joshua. As the priests are crossing over the river with the ark of God on their shoulders, God stops the flow of the Jordan River. And the first 3 verses there read this way: When all the nation had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight. And Joshua called the 12 men, the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, Pass on before the ark of the Lord. They take this and they make a pile of memorial stones. And the purpose of it is, when your children see these stones, they say, What do these stones mean? You're supposed to recall what God has done for you. And that'll pass that on to your children to make them strong in the Lord, something you remember, or you remember your father teaching you, something like that. The stone in the field of Joshua, which we just talked about, there at Beth Shemesh. We'll look at another one in Joshua chapter 24. Joshua chapter 24 and verse 19. Remember Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. Choose you this day who you will serve, or the gods on the other side of the river. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Well, starting in verse 19, this is just a few verses after that. It says, But Joshua said to the people, You are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. And the people said to Joshua, No, but we will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said to the people, You are witnesses against yourselves, that you have chosen the Lord to serve him. And they said, We are witnesses. He said, Then put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, The Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone and set it up there under the terebinth that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, Behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. So Joshua sent the people away, every man to his inheritance. We see the Ebenezer stone we're talking about. These stones of remembrance are really all through the scriptures. There may be some that I'm not even thinking about, but they were to help the people remember important things relating between them and Jehovah. Very important things. Now, the Lord has helped all of us. He's helped us just like he helped them. Think about them. The Lord has helped them. And we, as well as they, we need help remembering that, don't we? We have a tendency to think that everything that we accomplish is us. It's me. I've done it, right? Everything I've accomplished, it's so easy for me to think that I've done all of that. And yet, what makes it so strange is that when I think that way, why was I born here? Why was I not born in Syria? Or somewhere in the Congo? Somewhere in Belize or somewhere like that? Why did that happen to me? Well, is it the Lord's blessing? Can I count on those things to be the Lord blessing me in that way? I haven't earned it, right? None of us have earned being here any more than the one born somewhere else has earned that. No, the Lord helps us. We've got to remember that always and give him the glory for those things. So when we think about that, the Lord has helped us. We need help remembering. Just look at how many times God left his people in the Old Testament. He left them to their own devices because of their wickedness. Just leave them be for a long time. And then he'll send someone to deliver them out of that. So the question then becomes, what do you think Israel was thinking when they would look at these stones? When they look at the Ebenezer stone later, what do you think they thought? When they would go down and they would see the stones piled up by the Jordan, what did they think? When they saw the stone that Joshua set up, where that they made a covenant with God. What did they think about those things? They just ignore them? It's likely. There's a lesson there for us. We don't need to do that. What are our Ebenezers? Look at Hebrews chapter 11. I'm not going to give you instructions to set up some kind of a rock somewhere in your yard or anything like that. That's not really what this is talking about. We set up Ebenezers in our mind, don't we? Chapter 11 and verse 39 through 12 in verse 2 says, "And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised." And he's just talked about that some people call the hall of faith. All these by faith, this person did this and this person did that. And the witness of those people looking forward to something greater, even though they didn't know what was coming, and yet we live in that. All these things, and all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, and that apart from us they should not be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. What's one of our Ebenezers? How about the scriptures themselves? Is this something that you're meditating on? Is this something that you leave on the coffee table or the dresser or the bookshelf or something like that? And just on Sunday morning, you swipe by there and you pick that thing up and you come here and you get back home and you lay it right back there and you go about your week. Wednesday night, you touch it again. Bring it to Bible class with you. That's not the way a memorial works, is it? We're not going to remember much that way. We spend time meditating on these things. Of course, the greatest Ebenezer stone, the stone that was rolled away from the tomb. Do you think about that? Jesus' resurrection. And it's a memorial for something that we get to look forward to. God will raise us, right? And if we're servants of his, he'll raise us to the right hand where he is. And if we're not, we will be resurrected. It will be to eternal damnation. That's something to think about. Another Ebenezer stone we did this morning, the Lord's Supper. Is that not a hither by thy help I've come? Certainly. We take part in that death and his burial and his resurrection through baptism. It is so powerful. These things need to be ingrained in us so that we completely understand them and we meditate on them, we dwell on them, and they remind us who we are. They remind us what we need to do, what kind of lives we need to live. You know, if we did that, lessons like this morning about modesty, they would be superfluous, wouldn't they? Because we would want to be people of the book, people of God. And it's not that we wouldn't need any instruction, but as far as encouragement to follow the instruction, we wouldn't need it. We would just start following God. We would want to protect our bodies and those types of things. So, Ebenezer stones, they're not something we set up physical things somewhere, right? We have a physical memorial in the Lord's Supper. It's much more spiritual. We think about the Lord's death, burial, and resurrection, that stone being rolled away, and that's certainly something we remember in our mind. Set them up in your mind. Remember that the Lord has helped you until now, but you've got to spend some time in meditation and thinking about God and some of the things he has done. Let's listen to some of these verses. John chapter 8 and verse 58, Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Do we think about that as something Jesus said? That's something we dwell on. We see the power of Jesus. We see the eternality of Jesus. Jesus is claiming here complete deity. Remember when God appeared to Moses at the burning bush? "Who shall I tell them sent me?" You tell them, "I am sent you." Jesus here says, "I am." Some versions say, "I am he." He is not in there. Jesus says, "Truly, truly, before Abraham was, I am." Mark 14, verse 60 through 62, and the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with clouds of heaven. You think of all those things that Jesus went through and keep those in your mind. Is that an Ebenezer stone for you? Because we benefit from those things. By his help, we've come to this point. Matthew 28, the first 6 verses there. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay." These images that we get from reading the text need to be vivid in our minds, like Ebenezer stone, something to remind us of who God is, who Jesus is, and what he has done for us. So think about those things. Go ahead and get your songbooks out. Turn to the number that's been selected. There may be one here this evening who needs to render obedience to the gospel of Christ, and we want to encourage you to do just that. Come forward, confess his name, repent of your sins, and be buried with him in baptism. You can be raised to walk a new life. Your sins be washed away. Maybe one who's done that, but you know that you're not leading the life that God desires. You can make that right today. You can come back to him, start serving him once more, and we stand by ready to help you in any way that we can. So won't you come as we stand together and sing.